Seattle native and Central District resident Vivian Phillips is a communications professional and arts leader. She founded and launched ARTE NOIR online in May 2021, and in September 2022, opened as a physical space in the historic Central District, showcasing Black art and products made by Black creatives. Vivian led the public art plan and led a community-based artist selection process for Midtown Square, where ARTE NOIR is the anchor tenant. Please give her a warm welcome as she...
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vivian.
I'm gonna bring it just a little bit closer. Thank you all so very much for your coming inside, out of the sun, out of this beautiful, beautiful Seafair weekend. I want you all to know that we are all so sorry that Marcus and Mayor Wilson was both unable to join us. We are, we're gonna do something a little bit different. We've got a couple of experts here. We're gonna talk a little bit about Seattle democracy as we know it, but we're also gonna talk about the content of the Freedom Plane papers. And we're gonna attempt to give you some of your evening back. Would you like that? Would you like that? I don't hear that well, so you're gonna have to respond. It's a beautiful day, so it turns out to be a benefit. We're gonna get our time back before dark, before the sun goes down. But it is my absolute honor to be here this evening and to have a chance to be in conversation with these two incredible individuals. I have to go ladies first because Leonard and I have known each other for 120 years. I know half of the age of the United States of America, but we're gonna get into it today. Please also welcome Ming Francis. She is the G. Allen and Barbara Delsman Associate Professor of Political Science and an Associate Professor of Law, Societies, and Justice at the University of Washington. She specializes in the study of American politics. I love that so much, with broad interest in other things that I love, which include constitutional law, Black political activism, critical philanthropy, and the post-Civil War South. She's the author of the award-winning book, Civil Rights, The Making of the Modern American State. And her research and commentary have been featured on numerous news outlets. Frances is a proud alumni of Seattle Public Schools. Yes, girl. And she is also an alumni of Rice University in Houston and Princeton University, where she received her MA and PhD in politics. Please welcome Ming Francis. My dear friend, Leonard Garfield, is the executive director of MOHAI. He is at the helm for all activities at the museum, works with the Board of Trustees, which I don't envy. I'm sorry, I just, that's okay. And he works with the community to achieve the mission of MOHAI. Leonard holds an MA degree in American culture from the University of Michigan and has more than 30 years of experience managing regional cultural organizations, 6 years as executive director of the King County Office of Cultural Resources, which is now For Culture. And that is where he directed programs of the King County Arts Commission and the King County Landmarks and Heritage Commission. I don't see it in his bio that that's where we met, but you can correct that later.
It's normally in my bio.
Leonard served as Washington State Historic Preservation Programs Manager, the Wisconsin State Historic Preservation Historian, and led MOHAI to its move to right here in Seattle's Lake Union Park in 2012, and launched MOHAI's Bezos Center for Innovation in 2013. He's taught historic preservation at the College of Architecture and Urban Design at the University of Washington, and among his writings, he is the co-author of Built in Washington, an architectural history of the state, published by WSU Press. Welcome, Leonard Garfield.
Thank you.
So as we know, we're going to have a much different conversation. Well, we're going to have a different conversation than the one we originally intended. But I think it gives us a little bit more time, Leonard, if we can start with you to really talk about the Freedom Plane exhibits, what it was that you envisioned when MOHAI went forward to secure this as the last stop on the tour. Wow. And what is it that you are hopeful that Seattle residents would get from having exposure to these founding documents?
Well, it's really an extraordinary opportunity for MOHAI and for Seattle. How many of you have had a chance to see the documents upstairs? Almost everybody. So I really should be asking the question of you in a way. But this was, to me, the most meaningful way to commemorate and reflect on America's 250th anniversary. Because what's so unique about these oh, I'm sorry, thank you. Thank you for letting me know. They said to bring it really close, and I didn't listen to them. But what's so exciting about these documents, to me, to see them in person, is we see them changing in the moment. The Bill of Rights that's up there, did you notice that certain rights have been crossed out? The Constitution that's up there has handwritten notes of edits, corrections, changes. To me, it's a reflection of that phrase in the Constitution, toward a more perfect union, recognizing, and these documents prove it, that it was never complete. It was far, far from perfect. And yet people at that time, at that very moment, were beginning to change it. And that responsibility has now come to us. It's up to us to make the changes that we want to make within this framework that we were given of the ideal, the aspiration of equality, of liberty, of self-governance that never was fully or even partially, fragmentally realized. But the course of American history has constantly been addressing that with steps forward and steps back. But from the day those documents were created, people were changing them. That's who we are. We can change those. And so what I wanted, Vivian, was people to see these documents and to feel empowered to know that the power is in our hands. It's not in the White House, it's not in Congress, it's not the Supreme Court. There's a heck of a lot of power residing there. But the biggest power in the American democratic system is the power of the people, and that's what those documents represent.
So can I assume that this is not an exhibit that was planned to be at MOHAI a long time ago?
This was a great opportunity when the National Archives thought we can keep these documents in vaults, and literally these documents, when they leave here, will be in a vault for the next decade, because they literally cannot be exposed to light and air. So this is a really rare opportunity, and they wanted to do something to really take, much in the spirit of these documents, to take democracy to the people and to allow communities to see it. So 8 cities across the country have been selected. None of them were part of the original 13 colonies. This has not been to the 13 colonies. And now it's in the other Washington, about as far away from the traditional Washington as you can get. But we thought this, when we were approached about hosting this, and the only condition was that you have the conservation standards, so the climate's very rigorously controlled, the security is heightened over what we normally would do, but also that you make it free. And we love it every time we can make something free. And we decide, let's not just make the documents free, because Seattle's history is also part of this history, so let's make the whole museum free and talk about the history that we all know and love, because you know what, it's all, as the professor knows, it's all connected. It's all connected.
I love what you said about the power of people to change what our government, what our system of democracy looks like. And a lot of that is the focus of some of the permanent exhibits that are here, specifically the ones that deal with activism in Seattle. Before we talk about activism, and before I even ask you the first question that you know I'm going to ask you, Professor Megan Francis, I want to know, how is it that you became interested to the degree that you are in American politics?
Oh.
Yeah.
I did not, so that question was not coming. Hey everyone, I'm Megan Francis. It's really good to be here. Thank you, Vivian, so much for curating this conversation, and to MOHAI, and to all of you who are spending part of your evening with us. So I grew up in the Mount Baker, Columbia City area of Seattle in the 80s. And then I went to Garfield High School in the 90s. And I remember I took like I don't know if they even still have them. I took like the PSATs, and then I was gonna go to, I was trying to figure out how to go to college. And at Garfield, there's like one counselor for like, at the time, for 450 students. So you had to do it yourself. But I had a group of my friends at Garfield who were like, these are the colleges I'm going to and I wanna go to. And another group of my friends who were like, huh, what, who? Maybe I'll go to UW, maybe I'll go to Eastern, maybe I won't go. I gotta take care of my parents. And I was like, what is going on here? And so like that was actually for me, even though there were a lot of other signs for me, but there was this moment where I felt like so many of my friends were going in different directions, and it wasn't because one group of friends was smarter than the other group of friends, but like had a different set of life possibilities before them. And I did not understand that as a 16, 17-year-old person growing up in Seattle. So then I went to Rice University and I was like, I'm about to be a computer scientist. I did leave out that I did an internship at Microsoft back in the day, right? Wow. And I was like, I'm gonna be a computer scientist. I'm gonna come back to Seattle. I'm gonna drive around in a Porsche like my manager did, and that's gonna be my life. And so that was my major when I went to Rice University. That's why I went to Rice, actually. And I was like, I hate these classes. These are terrible classes. And then I did what I told myself that I would never actually do, which I tell all my students to do at UW, which is just to take classes that you're interested in. That sound interesting. Like, how do you become like, this is the beauty of, not Rice, but like well-rounded liberal arts education. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Is that like you take the classics even though like you're like, what can I do with that major, like degree, right? But because it's interesting. So I was like, ooh, what's political science? What's econ? Yeah. What's history? What's Caribbean nation building? And so I took all these classes, and then all of a sudden, all of the things that didn't make sense, like all these puzzle pieces in my life started to move and to fit. I'm like, oh, the reason why this happened in my community in Seattle is because there's economic inequality, and that leads people to live in different neighborhoods. Oh, because of this, because there's power that works in local politics. This is why things work the way they do. Yeah. This is the reason why Garfield was over-policed, and the CD at that time was, and so for me, I got interested in politics, and specifically American politics, because, and this is my selfish reason, but it's my honest reason, which is that it helped me make sense of my life. And that's so cool. That is like, and it has continued. The reason why, and this is where I'll end on this question, is the reason why I've stayed in this interest in politics is because of a curiosity about power, and a belief that a deeper understanding of that, like politics shapes our entire world. Right. I teach a survey course at UW right now, and so it's politics majors, but it's mostly not politics majors, right? And what I say, I was like, you can go into medicine, you can go into marketing, you can go into the arts, but you're never escaping politics. Yes. You're just not. Yeah. And so you might as well try to understand a little bit about it so you can understand your world better and how to navigate that. It is a tool in a toolbox, and do not leave it on the table, especially not in this universe.
I love that. I'm glad I thought of that. I'm glad I thought to ask you that. Yeah. You know, when back before the earth broke up when I was in high school, we used to study contemporary problems. Yeah. That's what it was called then. Yeah. And that's where you got your, so you know it was a long time ago. Sure. Some of you all have been in one of my classes, I'm sure. But that's when we learned about American politics. That's when we learned about history. And it seems that that's all gone from the curriculums these days. It's like trying to keep up with the tech industry is more important than understanding and making sense of the world in which you are residing. So the other question I want to ask you is, given your vast knowledge of American politics and looking at America being 250 years old, these papers are celebrating 250, right? So why are they still relevant today?
Okay, so I love this. I knew this question was coming, though. I think that, so I'm gonna try to answer this, I think, in two ways. One, the case that I make to my students in any introduction course in American politics. I'm gonna do a little backup, if that's okay, to do a connecting story. I initially finished my PhD, was teaching American politics, teaching courses around American politics, and I was like, I don't want to teach a survey course. Why am I going to teach a survey course? That's boring. Old documents, old people, dead people. I want to teach more about contemporary problems, like social movements, which I hope we can talk about today as well. And then I was, my first job was at Pepperdine University in Malibu, California, and I taught a lot there, and I realized the importance of it just in terms of providing a landscape to understand everything else that comes afterwards. I'm somebody that also believes the kind of the juicy part of politics is actually the gray area. I'm actually not that interested in what's black and white, like what's clearly defined. And that is my roundabout way of getting to this question, which is, I think what is so exciting about the founding documents and the case that I make to my students right now is that this was a time in which there was just ideas, right? Jefferson's cribbing, right? From the ideas of the Enlightenment. He's like, okay, like pursuit of happiness, what are things that we should want, right? This idea about like, we have these things now, but what does it mean? Can you envision, like we spoke, I feel like, we don't talk about it a lot now, but I feel like early in like 2020, there was a lot of conversation, especially in left circles, around imagination and the importance of imagination and dreaming what a better world would actually look like. And that's in some ways kind of what they did. They were like, we don't like being governed by Britain, right? And so what does it actually mean to envision what a better world would actually look like? We're not there yet. And so we're gonna draft a bunch of ideas and have it as our North Star and like stumble along the way to get there. But like maybe future generations can actually get there. And I think it's also really useful in terms of what does it mean to envision a world that you may not experience right now, but being able to perhaps work towards that.
What's that saying? Plant trees that you will never, whose shade you will never experience. Yeah.
And like in some ways, that's what they were doing, right? Did the framers or the founding fathers, whatever word phrase that you want to use, did they envision this world right now? No.
Right.
But I think that the part that is also really exciting about that is to look at that as these were the documents that helped frame this moment, and that then generations of different people have interpreted in different ways, right? Like have taken these ideals and have been like, this is what freedom, this is what equality should mean, this is what justice should mean, this is actually who we the people are. It's actually women, it's actually people who don't own land, it's actually black people, right? It's actually Asian people. Like, so all of this comes afterwards, and it's not that necessarily like these documents gave them that, but it provided a type of framework, and I think it's really useful. I think we always should be in a place of imagination of and definitely now, of what a better democracy, of what a better country, what a better government looks like. Right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, and this is one I see, which is that then there is another case. My senior colleague, George Lovell, at the University of Washington, him and I, 2 years ago, we started teaching a new course because of this moment that we are in called Can Democracy Be Saved? ? Wow. Right? And then where he's the kind of person where he's like, hey, this is the founding. And then I'm the person in that class, in that course, who's like, what's the case? Like, maybe, like, it's also true, and that maybe this is not working. This is not working right now. Government right now, especially at the federal level, is not working in many, many ways. And what is wrong with saying, hey, we might need to rewrite a new constitution and a new set of people and new values right now. Many big countries, we have the longest, oldest constitution, I mean, not the longest, shortest, oldest constitution that's still in place. And so why are we continuing to salvage and like reclaim this? There is a very strong case that many people have made that perhaps what we need to do is like in terms of like appreciate what has happened in the past and what we were given, and then try again and write something that is more inclusive.
I guess, when I think about it, I think that maybe that's what's happening. And maybe, is it possible that people are reimagining what America should or can look like, and it's just maybe not the most popular thought.
Yeah.
Is that possible that that's what's happening as well as, you know, the necessity to kind of take the documents and go, let's rewrite them? I have to tell you that going back in and looking at the Constitution and thinking about the founding papers, it was a little bit of a surprise reminder that the Constitution is a very short document. Yeah. It's the amendments that extend far beyond. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are about the possibility, both of you can answer this, the possibility of us being in a moment where the Constitution is going to be amended more.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting because almost from the beginning, well, the Bill of Rights was the first set of amendments. I mean, almost from the beginning, they said, wait a second, there's missing this, this, and that.
Right.
And protests against that, Shays Rebellion, I mean, all these protests, some of them were armed and violent, happened right away. So there was always this dynamism built into the system. And of course, Jefferson used the phrase in the Declaration, I'm going to forget the exact wording, but there are times when a government does need to reinvent itself and does need to have a revolution, basically. And the Constitution frames it as toward a more perfect union. So the notion that it is organic in many ways and should be organic to keep it vibrant. But I think, I would turn to Megan for an understanding on this, but the amendments to the Constitution happened fairly frequently through the 19th and early 20th century, and then suddenly, and actually it was the Equal Rights Amendment, wasn't it? Although we got the 18-year-old vote slipped in there and a few others, but it seemed to come, and it's partly the sclerosis in our own political system of recent decades, the amendment process has really stopped. And there's a whole lot, actually, historically, about that whole system is predicated on the way votes are attributed, which of course goes back to the Constitution and how human beings were treated in terms of who was counted and who wasn't. But it's become very difficult to amend the Constitution. I think one of the the fears of seriously changing it, to Megan's point, is the fear that would it end up in a situation where the result of that would be something that would be scary? But what is your thought about the amendment process, or is that a viable tool still for evolving the Constitution?
I think it's a tool that's on the table right now in terms of the amendment process. I don't see it's so, everything is so gummed up at the federal level. That process is going to be, that's not a process, like let's say that there's a change that I want, that's not gonna be an avenue, a route right now that I would pursue. I don't see any new amendments happening in areas that for me that I would like them to happen, which is, I think that's why there has been, I feel like, increased energy and the likelihood of it or not, about kind of reestablishing a new constitutional convention and what would that actually look like. There are things that all of us here on this panel and many other people talk about that are deeply undemocratic about the Constitution, right? I feel like the two things most people always pull out, and still every single time I teach American politics, it is still crazy, which is the Electoral College. It's just so insane, right? It's built and conceived on an idea that we don't trust people. Like that, this is that's the whole point of right? And then the other part here is going to be the Senate and how things are apportioned, right? That certain states have so much more power in the Senate than other states do.
So you're talking about gerrymandering and districting and all of that, and how that's going to impact.
And there's certain aspects about things that have changed over time, right? Now, unlike when the Constitution was passed, we people vote on senators, right? Where before in the Constitution, those were appointed by state legislatures, right? So but that has been done because of amendment. But the process of getting amendments because of where we are in politics, it is unlikely that there's going to be that things are going to, kind of the divisiveness in politics and the polarization that exists right now in United States politics is going to dramatically decrease in the next decade or 2 decades. That's just, it's unlikely to happen. Right? I think the exciting aspects are people who are thinking outside of the box. I think what's frustrating for, I wouldn't even say just young people right now, is people who are trying to figure out work inside of the system. Right? And so this is the call for people who are like, let's think of like new solutions, because this is not working. And at what point are you like, democracy's on the guardrails, democracy's fragile? Are you like, we are no longer in a democracy, right? And we need to say that. That's some people, many of my students, and we need to say that and then work towards things. There's a whole other group of my students who'd be like, no, no, no. There is so much good here that still can be like reclaimed and salvaged. We just need better politicians. We need more young people in office. We need these old people to stop dying in office, right? That's what they tell. I'm like, okay, right? We need more just policy, right? We need better local governance, better state governance. This is what they will say, and their interest is really about a deep belief in something that you have already mentioned, in the role of different types of social movements. And they really view like that is, at least in their minds, especially a number of my students have come up through climate justice, have come up through guns in terms of like thinking about what are different like young people movements around that. And they see that as a type of reclamation and like evidence that democracy, at least in this country, still works.
I wonder for both of you, I mean, when I look at any parts of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, any of those documents, I see duplicity. I see an ideal, but I see nothing that supports the actualization of that ideal. So, I mean, when we're talking about why it's important, why is it important when it doesn't have inherent in it the kind of authentic care for humanity that we read it as?
Well, I mean, I think that reminds me of something Megan said, which was this was a revolutionary concept, just an ideal, aspirational, obviously not even close to being realized. To some extent, I think they understood that it wasn't close to realization, because there was a lot of discussion about slavery and the immorality or justification for it, obviously among Jefferson, but even among George Washington and other people. They debated it all the time. So it wasn't just that's how things were. They consciously were acting in contrast to the ideals they stated. But what's so interesting about it is that they framed up ideals that then inspired not only the United States, but so many countries around the world, the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, the Pan-African movements towards independent countries, all were heavily influenced by the ideals stated in those documents. And one of the things that's, I think, maybe one note of optimism we can take is that in recent polls of the American people, the ideals of the Declaration, I mean, you would think this would be, as they say, self-evident. I mean, of course, people should believe in this, but we know how divided we are, and we know how hard it is to get a majority to agree to anything, that the ideals of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that all people are created equal, rank in the 90 percentile. I mean, and that's one thing that across the political spectrum, and of course that's the lowest bar you could possibly set in today's world, and yet that is a bar that there is some commonality. So I think what the value of those documents are is simply the framing up of there is a better world that we can create, and that it is really our responsibility to do it. Nobody's going to do it for us. And nobody did it for them. Nobody did it for all the people who fought to expand those freedoms. As you know, Vivian, because you've been part of that history, nobody said, here's a right that we're going to have. Nobody said we're going to end this war. It was only when people got collectively together and took the power. And that, to me, is what those ideals inspire.
Yeah, I guess I think about it from the perspective of this is all built on capitalism. Like they didn't want to be taxed. They got out of Britain, they came here, they didn't want to be taxed.
What was that?
Right? I mean, that's kind of the way it started, right? And then you have coming to a land that is inhabited. and taking that land. The Revolutionary War was not fought by white people alone, right? And so it's all of those things that I feel are kind of baked into the founding documents that are so inauthentic to the world we say we want to aspire to, which brings me back to, why is this even important, you know? And that's just my own personal thing. But let's talk about Seattle democracy as we know it. Seattle is, what, 159 years old, something like that?
That's probably right.
I told you I was here.
You know, here's one thing, though. We should say the incorporated city of Seattle from the late 1860s, so we can do our math from that. And I think, you know, back in the day when we would say, well, Seattle was created when the first white settlers came, but of course, you know, as we know, humans and the indigenous world has been here for, you know, time immemorial.
That's a great point. Thank you.
But
incorporated Seattle
city,
is about 159
the late
years.
1860s. So yeah, you're right on the money.
So just thinking about how democracy shows up in our government, our local government, with a city that's so young compared to the parts of the nation that's 200, 250 years old, even older. Where do we see pieces of our founding ideals in our own charter, in our own democratic system? And where are the places that there are gaps and that we need to be focused on trying to fill those gaps so that they're more related to the high ideals?
That is a good question. You were going to pose that question with the mayor, I believe, when I looked at the script. So I didn't have a chance to really think about that. But you know, it's interesting. I'll just give like a little fraction of an answer, and then I want to hear what Megan has to say. But it's interesting that the Washington State Constitution, which obviously reflected a lot of the same values, did have some features that were sort of enhancement or improvements. And I was talking with Lieutenant Governor Denny Heck the other day, and he said he was elected to the state legislature when he was 24. And I said, well, that's interesting because the Constitution, to be a congressional representative, you have to be at least 25. And he said, well, the Washington State Constitution says you only need to be 18. So did you know that you can be 18 and be elected to the state legislature? So I hear your question and I'm not answering it.
Okay.
I found that one little thing.
Okay, thanks.
Kind of fun. But Megan has an answer for your question.
No, I don't have an answer. I think it's an important question.
Yeah.
I mean, the way that I'm hearing it, and like I don't have the specifics on this. The way that I'm hearing this is and push back in or add to this, which is how is democracy realized in Seattle, and how is that impacted by, at the federal level, our understanding of these ideals in terms of these founding
Very
documents,
much so.
right?
Yeah.
It's in so many ways, like this is the part of the importance of cities and towns across this country. They are not separated from, what goes on at the federal level, right? And so, in terms of what are the gaps, and I mean, you know, one of the things that was a popular phrase for a very long time, it felt like in the academy around American politics as well as in local government, was that like cities and states were like laboratories for democracy, right? That like you couldn't like experiments, whether it was, let's say, school lunch or vouchers, you couldn't like immediately do that at the national level, but you could pilot that in a state or in a city, right? And more recently, there has been a bit of conversation about states, cities, and towns being places against laboratories actually against democracy as a way, this is gonna tie into some of my research here, it will make sense, I promise, in a moment here, as a way, 20 years ago, many in the conservative right, especially billionaires, were trying to like impact at the federal level, and they weren't having much of an impact. And so what they did is then they moved it to focus on state legislatures and state campaigns. And they were like, if we can win on abortion, if we can win on climate, if we can win on guns at the state level, at different states, we can build a movement to get what we want that then will feed up to the federal level. right? And I'm saying that to say that that has not fully happened in Seattle. That has not fully happened in Washington State. That in many ways it has gone in the reverse direction, actually, right? In terms of Seattle, Washington State as well as California, after the abortion decision, were like, oh, hey, that's like, so there's ways in which the Constitution was set up that gave states at that time a lot of autonomy, right? That an understanding of, at that time, of course, that Alabama was not going to be the same as New Jersey.
Right. Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And so what is clear is that Seattle and Washington State has developed a different type of identity than many other states have. It has been clear that certain special interests have not bought Seattle. It is very clear as we sit where we sit that certain special interests have bought different parts of Seattle,
Absolutely.
different parts in
Sure.
Seattle politics,
Sure.
right? And that we should be cognizant of that. A call out to the capitalism
Right.
like frame that you gave us earlier, right? And there are always, I think, in terms of the way that we can see influences from the founding documents, there's certain ways that like money continues to influence and frame up our politics. But there's a lot of power that the people actually have, like in Seattle and in Washington State, much more so than other places that I have visited and that I've done research about.
Wow, that's good to know.
And I think one of the things though, about the federal system is it does give local communities some power to really set their own rules and regulations. It's heavily influenced, especially in the 20th century, by the federal government, which is a complete reversal of what it used to be. It used to be, which is why we do end up with an electoral college where little states get almost as much power as big states, and it's completely undemocratic in that sense. But it does allow cities and states to exercise some autonomy, which is why you see, states that are liberal like Washington State creating climate legislation that's really in contradiction to some of the federal EPA policies, or actually suing the federal government because they feel that the execution of laws that the federal government is pursuing are not constitutional. So that kind of dynamism between local and state government and the federal government is somewhat unusual, actually, globally speaking, because most countries have a central federal government that sort of runs everything. When you go to England, for example, the prime minister decides on what the bus fare is. And so there is the opportunity for local communities to exercise power, recognizing that the federal government, obviously plays a very large role in everything we do.
Can we point to some of the movements that have pushed some of this legislation? Because from my memory, for the most part, the legislation that pushes us forward is not normally an idea of an elected official.
That's right.
It is normally a result of some pressure from community or organized groups. So given that we're all kind of from Seattle, what have you all noted as some of those movements that have really pushed change, that have taken hold nationally, locally, and nationally? And the only one that I can immediately point to, there are others, but I think about Earth Day. Absolutely. And I think about Dennis Hayes. Young 20-some-year-old Dennis Hayes, who had this idea about what we could do to better the environment that led to the establishment of the EPA.
Yeah, absolutely. But even before that, really the cleanup of Lake Washington and Metro was not a legislative action. It was really local communities coming together, Republican, Democratic, East Side, Seattle, saying, hey, we've polluted the lake. This isn't good for us, and certainly not for future generations. Let's clean it up. It was the largest environmental remediation that wasn't federally dictated or the result of a court order. But even I think of the Four Amigos. I think of our civil rights leaders who voluntarily came together across ethnic lines, across different political positions, and said, we need to fight for fair housing. We need to fight for equal opportunity. City Hall did not want to do it. Those young high school kids from Garfield High School went into City Hall and they laid down outside the mayor's office until the mayor said, I'll sign that fair housing legislation back in the 1960s.
And that
so
was
I think there's
Mayor George Clinton?
I think it was George
not
Clinton.
George. Was his first name George?
Yeah, Gordon
Clinton. I'm thinking about, Parliament Funkadelic. I'm sorry.
I was like,
I think there was a George Clinton somewhere in our lives, but But I mean, I think that's a good one. And then the whole movement towards the reparations for Japanese Americans who were incarcerated started in Seattle. In fact, MOHAI played a little role in that because we had an exhibit developed by the Japanese American community back in the 1980s called The Pride and the Shame. The seniors who had actually experienced as adults the incarceration really didn't want to talk so much about it, but their kids did. And they created an exhibit, and that exhibit really, I think, elevated the conversation. And our friend from King County, who I'm going to blank on his name, who's led that, Frank Abe, who's done so much of the history of that and tells that story. So I think there are some really powerful instances of local community activists taking the power into their own hands and making that legislation happen or make that change happen, because otherwise it wouldn't, because it wasn't in the interest of the people who had the power.
That's right. Thoughts?
No, this was great. I feel like I just learned a lot. I'm just gonna do a short, like, 2-finger add-on and also a plug to 2 books in the bookstore as I was walking through. I think just to add on to what you mentioned here, for me, and in part because it's also my research is civil rights, right? That, like, what happened in terms of civil rights leaders in Seattle, coming from University of Washington, and Quintard Taylor. There's a book that they are selling in the bookstore that's really important about Seattle civil rights history, right? And that also, I know most people in this room may know, but if you don't, that's perfectly fine as well. But right, Seattle was a red line city, and there is a reason, not anymore, but there's a reason why Black people lived in the Central District. Vivian's still holding out, apparently. In the Central District, right, and in the Rainier Beach and in the South End, in the South End area. Right, in part because of redlining that happened in Seattle, and a lot of the organizing was about housing segregation in this city. What I will also say, the other thing that I am just very, very aware of, because it was my own experience, there's another book by Haymarket Press by Aaron Dixon back there, who was part of the Black Panther Party here in Seattle. And the reason why I said I was familiar with this is Aaron Dixon was the community safety officer at Garfield when I went there.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Because he basically, and I didn't know, again, a young 14, 15-year-old Megan Francis who thought she knew everything, was like, oh, who's this older Black guy with some gray hair and some dreads out here?
You had no idea he was the co-founder of the Seattle chapter of the Black Panther Party.
Checking on us. People was getting fights all the time back in the 90s, all the time, fights, acting up, and he was like, what you're not gonna do is go to prison. I'm gonna hem you up, I'm gonna holler at you, and I'm gonna talk to you about this history. And that is actually how I found out about the Black Panthers. And in Seattle, I had one of the most vibrant chapters on the West Coast of the Black.
The second chapter, right after Oakland. And you know what? The Dixon's home is being proposed as a City of Seattle landmark.
Oh, I didn't know this.
So everybody get together. The Black Heritage Society of Washington, partner with MOHAI, is pushing for this, and our friend Stephanie Johnson-Tolliver is leading that cause.
As is the Black Panther Wall on 20th and Spruce,
which is in your
it's my neighborhood.
Your neck of the woods.
Okay, now we're getting real cozy. So I'm not going to go there.
No, go there.
But I think this history of redlining, and if anybody is interested in this history, one of the things that I think that's really fascinating about it is you can see how democracy does and does not work. Because I think it was outlawed by, I think Dixie Lee Ray signed the resolution that outlawed redlining in like 1977. 1968 is when all of the efforts really started in earnest. Am I right, Sharon? 64.
Because when was the open housing legislation in 65, the city passed? When was that, Sharon?
I think that was 65.
65.
Was the first open housing march.
Right. And they finally passed the legislation citywide in 65. And then the Federal Fair Housing Act outlawed redlining, I think, across the country. You are probably an expert.
I have to just say, Sharon Maeda is like the gang of four, fifth.
Yeah, the fifth of the gang of four.
She's like the fifth. She's been around for a long time. I want to ask, I can't believe we've talked as long as we actually have, right? I know. But I have one final question, and it's what are some of the things that you think people can look for, take from the Freedom Papers, the founding documents that give them hope and push people forward if they're stuck. Is there anything that you think might help do that?
Yeah. Well, I see so much wisdom in this audience, and Ana Maria Pinto da Silva, who's an expert on democracy in the age of AI, I think this is the thing we're facing right now. And when I look at those documents, they're written documents by people, they're ideas, as Megan said. Those ideas that we all have, that you all have right now as you're thinking, those are the things that actually move the world. And how we take our ideas and manifest them in real time is up to us. But 250 years ago, some people who were very creative and imaginative did it. May not be the way we would have done it. Time has changed. The situation that they created is not where we want to end up. But it is an example of taking ideas and realizing them. And as we enter the age of AI, the real challenge is how are we going to stay empowered, feel the power in ourselves, which is our inheritance as Americans if we want to believe those ideals, and then actually make it a reality. So that's what I hope you all take from those documents.
That's great. Thank you.
Wonderful.
What about you?
So I just want to say just one thing about the last exchange that I think then ties into this last important question here, which is the thing that comes up for me and the importance of this last exchange was the importance of actually people putting into practice and fighting for what we in some ways at the federal level, state level, local level already in some ways granted or given, right? That it doesn't matter that we have the Civil Rights Act of 64, the Voting Rights Act of 65. It doesn't matter that we have housing. Unless people hold politicians and community members feet to the fire. Yeah. It's people who put into reality what these things actually mean. Right? And that's in terms of whether it's talking about the Dixons, whether it's talking about different people around Earth Justice. That is actually what makes things actually
democracy
happen. Democracy work.
Yeah.
Right? That's actually what it is.
Yeah.
That is what is so exciting. To this question in terms of where I see hope in that. Actually, it's the people. At the end of the day, I think "we the people" is one of the most powerful phrases. I genuinely believe that.
Opening statement.
It is. It's it comes from us, right? And the thing that I always leave my students, and I'll leave you with this, is that I think imagination is one of the most powerful muscles and tools we have that we don't spend enough time on. Today, justifiably so, we are putting out fires in our families, in our communities, in our politics right now because there are so many fires to put out. But what that does is it takes away time and energy from the dreaming and the imagination that we need to do to build a better world. And we are always living in somebody's imagination, so why not live in your imagination of what a better world actually is, right? So,
Yes. Thank you, Leonard, Megan Francis. Thank you so much. I think we have time for a couple of questions. If anybody, don't look at me like that.
I'm not looking at you. I'm just looking.
If anybody has any questions.
I don't have a question, and I hate it when people make comments instead of questions. But I have to have a comment about the exhibit upstairs. After looking at those historic documents, going into that next space and seeing the things that people here have done over the last several decades should be an inspiration to exactly what you're saying, Megan.
Sharon,
I mean, I found that juxtaposition just perfect.
Because we wanted to tell that local story because we knew we had taken the power and we were going to balance the story out. So Sharon's referring to an exhibit that we're calling For Which It Stands. We were just inspired by our collection of flags, just a design idea, but it opened up all these stories of really, wouldn't you say, heroic action on the part of all of us to reflect, respond to, and lean into the ideals that are on paper in the other room.
Right, but I have to say one other thing. I just learned today that in 98118, where Garfield High School is,
98144.
oh, 4444 and 18.
Yeah.
We're all 98144. all three of
Right.
us.
The 37th district.
Okay.
Yes.
Only 11% of the ballots have been returned.
Yeah.
And we only have 5 days.
Right. And
Only
so,
11%.
and so people say, why do we have a president that maybe we don't support, or why does this happen? The power of the franchise, which people have fought so hard to expand from the very first day because it was so narrow. If we don't encourage young people, our neighbors, our colleagues, to exercise that, there really isn't any hope for democracy, because that is the starting point.
Well, I think one of the other ways that democracy shows up, it just made me think about when you brought up the vote, is the city of Seattle has democracy vouchers that attempts to make the financial playing field a lot more even. So I think that's another way that democracy does show up here, and it's called that, which I think is really bold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. I really enjoyed it. I have two things, actually. One, I'm currently reading Aaron Dixon's Die Standing. It's fantastic. I recommend it. And the second thing is, I have voted. And what I did is, took a lot of research because there were so many little elections this time, right? And I sent out a message on my Facebook and to my friends. Here's who I voted for, and here's the sources I used. The voters pamphlet, the papers, League of Women Voters videos, and what's the other one? Seattle Channel videos. So like kind of talking about it with your friends might help them understand a little bit more what's out there.
Nice.
Thank you for doing that.
Thank you. I'm going to do a shameless plug right here, since we've been talking about Aaron and Elmer Dixon. Aaron Dixon and his brother Elmer Dixon, the co-founders of the Seattle chapter of the Black Panther Party, will be at ARTE NOIR tomorrow at 2 o'clock.
Okay, now tell everybody
in conversation with Angela Rye,
oh my God,
as we close the most recent exhibit called Central District Legacy, Black Power, Black Panthers.
Does everybody know where ARTE NOIR is?
23rd and Union. Can't miss it, on the corner. We're not Uncle Ike's, so if you get to Uncle Ike's, look right.
That sounds so cool.
Yeah, the exhibit is amazing.
Oh my
and
God.
Elmer, Aaron, I think we sold the last copy of Our People Are Rising yesterday, but we do have Die Standing by Elmer Dixon. So
such great people. Anna has a question.
Well, okay then. Thank you all so very much for your time. We have one more question. Who has the mic? Who has the mic?
I had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh no, that's quite all right. Firstly, just a reflection back. What an honor to be on the receiving end of your brilliance. And Leonard, thank you so much for everything MOHAI has done to organize this fantastic panel. It's amazing. My question to you both, to all three of you, is understanding that democracy's always been a hot mess. Right?
Can you put the mic up just a little bit closer?
Yeah. Democracy has always been a hot mess. It's a messy, loud, family having an argument out on the street kind of thing. And it's actually something that makes me very proud to be an American, is how messy it is, how unbuttoned up it is. And as the mom of a rising junior at Garfield, and somebody who's really committed to intergenerational learning and the power of our elders, can you reflect for us what you feel in this next season, in the fall, the single most important things that we can do to lean into the fight that is democracy?
Wow.
Is that for all of us? So one of the things that I've just embraced recently, and someone kind of shook me, was like I was being shaken out of a sleep, because we're all in this place where we feel like there's nothing we can do. we feel helpless. We feel like everything is happening to us, that we're not making things happen. And I think it's because we're constantly focused on the big issue. We don't focus on the little issues at home. And so I think one of the things that I believe we can do is start really leaning into local elections and making sure that the right people are elected locally and they can start to affect change that moves up the ladder. So I'm really into that right now. I'm really like paying real close attention, more attention, if that's possible, than I have in the past, but understanding that that has an effect and that we can cause effect at a higher level. Yeah.
This is a great question. Oh, yeah. Is this better? Perfect. This is a great question. I don't have a perfect answer. My answer right now, though, is actually pulling on what was just said. I think right now trying to, it feels like so much of the news stories are about what's going on nationally, justifiably so. That's just a hard area to crack. But there's just so much, I think, that is possible at the state and at the local level. And so for me, I'm gonna pretend your child is a student of mine, right? And then what would I say? Because students come into my office hours and they're like, okay, well, what can I do? Because this just feels overwhelming, right? And what I say is to find, I think everybody has something that they actually care about. And to find what you actually care about and to find an organization or two that is connected and to show up. I think right now, like one of the things that I feel like got lost still in COVID that is still a little bit lost today is like showing up in community and being in spaces with people in community. And that just is not happening in ways that I think it could and it should. So for me, it's like, hey, what I tell students, I'm like, what do you care about? You care about education? Do you care about prisons? Do you care about arts? Do you tell me, what do you actually care about? What causes, what issues like make you upset, make you happy, make you angry? Find one or two. Don't try to sign up for 10.
Right.
You're gonna exhaust yourself, right? Find one or two that you actually care about and figure out a way to get involved. And when things get a little bit uncomfortable or sticky, don't give up. The other thing that I will also say is like, I love this comment over here about reading, is like, to like also increase and work on your political education, right? About a host of different issues. There's so many resources that are available to us. The reason why like I say don't just do that is because there's a way that we can just become bookworms and we're like, I read about this but I wasn't out there, right? So I just think what we need right now is one, to increase our political education to help us deal with what is uncomfortable, right? To help us build out that muscle, and then to actually practice that muscle. And then I think, especially for young people, to be able to see whether it is maybe a win in a local election, maybe it's a win on like local policy. They're like, oh shoot, like that can happen, right? I think is very empowering and exciting to see on a micro level, because that can at some point then like increase one's imagination about what is possible at the state and also at the national level.
Yeah, I really don't have too much to add to that, except that maybe to think about democracy as community in action, to Megan's point, that whether it's not even electoral politics, but your neighborhood association, your block club, your church, your corporation, whatever space you find yourself in. Anna, can I tell about you? Anna finds herself in the AI space and is an evangelist for democracy and equity and inclusion in that space. So you're evangelizing in your industry. That's democracy. That's really what democracy makes us think about, is how can we come together collectively to affect change? And so I would say for young people, local elections for sure, finding the issues you're passionate about, and then finding the people that are your community and become an evangelist for democracy.
And use MOHAI to learn about the history of democracy being pushed forward by people.
All right.
Yeah,
Thank you, Vivian.
It's a lot of it right here.
Thank you.
So thank you all again. I think that's the last
I
question.
think we have
Oh
one-
my
do
God, we have
one-
another
one
question.
More. Last one.
Sorry for.
That's fine. Thank
All right.
you.
This is a bit of a weird question as it's following up on the new constitution idea, but with all the powerful forces, shall we say, in the country right now, what would the country need to look like really in order to have a constitutional convention that isn't just similar to the last one, where there was a bunch of really, really rich people, and there was a lot of people that were prevented from showing up, shall we say.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is necessarily something that can be answered, but I figured it's worth a shot anyway.
That's a Megan question.
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
Oh,
Megan, you take that one because Vivian and I aren't smart.
Like,
We're not
what?
smart enough to answer
I mean,
that.
I have
Do you have an
ideas.
answer? Answer it then, Vivian.
I have
Answer it.
ideas.
Answer it.
Again, I think it's like we look at the big thing and think we can't do that. What would happen if we had constitutional congresses in our communities?
There you go.
I mean, we can do that. Yeah. People used to organize like that all the time. I don't think young people know that they can establish a political action committee. Do it. Pull your neighbors together and say, hey, you know what? We don't like the way this works. And change it. And again, you'll find a lot of that history where people did that right here at MOHAI.
That's true.
So I just think it can happen.
Yeah, I mean, the boring answer to this is, right, your question here is about how do we have a different, I'm not going to assume everybody's politics here, a different RNC convention, a different DNC convention. Is that part of the question here?
Or constitutional
Congress.
convention.
I mean,
think you
yeah,
would say.
yeah.
I
I mean, that's what it's become.
Yeah.
Is the two
Yeah.
conventions.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's going to be a part about people, and this is the part about people not buying into a strict two-party system, right? And so there's a larger conversation, and this is about the documents, and it's also about the parties, which is, do you work inside of the Democratic Party? Do you work inside of the Republican Party and try to become a different Republican or a different Democrat? Or do you want to do something else?
Brand
Because
new.
right now, it is a two-party control, and it comes with a tremendous amount of resources, right? This is the reason why I said it's the same as, not same, but similar to the documents, which is like, do we want to work to make these ideals, work for us today, or are we like, this doesn't work for us anymore, right? And that, I think, is a larger, juicier, complicated conversation because it is really hard, and this is why it ties into imagination, because it is really hard for people, it is really hard for people to imagine a type of politics of running for even local office outside of the Democrat and or Republican Party. Because, and this is the capitalism thing, because of how much money it is, right? Today, what I tell my students, you cannot run for the House today outside of 1.5 million. If you cannot raise 1.5 million, do not run for the House. Do not run for the Senate if you cannot raise $3 to $5 million. It is impossible in today's politics, right? We are talking right now about $1 billion elections, Biden and Trump this past year. I mean, not this past year, but this past election cycle, right? And so, but part of that, a significant part of that comes from the parties, right? And so, what you need is obviously, right, campaign finance reform, which actually both parties are interested in, some members, right? So, but you need a lot of different types of things in order to make that happen. It is not impossible. People on both sides are fed up, right, with these parties. But it just takes people, right? Establishing the type of vision, the type of politics that they actually want, and saying that right now what we have is not good enough, and it does not serve them anymore, right?
Hey, Megan, we know about Art Noir for the Dixons and the Black Panthers. Where do we find out more about your ideas? Where do we find you? Where do we find you?
Where do we find you?
We want to find you.
You find me at the University of Washington. I do like once or twice a year, once or every other year, a big public lecture. I am doing one, kind of an autopsy of the midterm elections in January of 2027. At KUOW?
KUOW?
Yeah. So I'll do a, so if you want to hear my take on that, which you don't.
Oh, yes, we do.
Yes, we do.
That'll be the next time I do it. Yeah, but otherwise, UW website,
And share again the name of your book and where it can be found.
Civil Rights in the Making of the Modern American State. That's an older book, though. I'm working on some more newer stuff about the civil rights movement and big philanthropy. That's, I think, more juicier and exciting.
I can't wait to hear
But
about
yeah.
Fun.
But anyways,
Wow.
it's been great to spend this evening with y'all.
Cool. Thank you, guys.
It has been great. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here and for staying. We appreciate it.
Thank you all so much, and thank you so much to our wonderful panelists.